It's great to welcome to the program today, back to the program, I should say, Dr. John Gartner, founder of Duty to Warn, co-editor of Rocket Man, Nuclear Madness and the Mind of Donald Trump. He taught in the Department of Psychiatry at Johns Hopkins Medical Center for 28 years. John, great to have you back on today.
Great to be back. I really enjoyed being on the show.
So listen, I don't even know where to start because since you were last on, you've been tracking what is concerning behavior by the President of the United States from a mental health perspective. We had this unexpected visit to Walter Reed Hospital in November. We don't have any particular reason to think that it was mental health or cognitive related specifically, but we don't really have a very clear answer as to why he did go. The idea that it was getting a jump on next year's physical is hard to believe at best. What are you seeing over the last few months? How much have you been looking at this Walter Reed thing?
Well, actually, to go to the Walter Reed thing, I have a theory about this based on no facts.
Good.
Although apparently it was reported that he had reported some kind of chest pains. That had been reported. I don't know if it had been verified.
I saw that it was speculated and denied by the White House, but their denials don't mean very much.
Don't mean anything, right? What they deny, they confirm in most cases. But actually, given his fast food diet and his being overweight and his being high on cholesterol, that's not unsurprising. But actually, a lot of people don't realize this. But chest pains is one of the most common presentations at an emergency room. And 90% of the time, it's a panic attack.
Right.
So all this started when the impeachment stuff started heating up. So my theory, based again, I say, on speculation, is he may have experienced chest pains as his presenting problem, but really he was having a panic attack. Actually, if he was having a panic attack, that might be the most reality-centered thing that he's done.
Well, that's why I actually speculated that it may have been one of those situations where you feel like you're having a heart attack and they do tests and the doctor comes out and says, you didn't have a heart attack. I think that this was a panic attack. What makes me skeptical about that is it seems that Trump lacks the personality traits that would get him to actually panic, because that requires sort of some self-awareness of the situation you're in.
Yeah. No, I think it's a very good point. In fact, part of his personality disorder is a lack of anxiety over being caught or punished, or that these psychopaths don't seem to weigh the probable risks and consequences of their behavior. All these people in jail, like, what did they think they were? How did they think they were even going to get away with it? But somehow they thought they were. So I agree with you about that. But the walls are really closing in on him. And this is one of the reasons, actually, that we should be very, very concerned right now. We predicted this actually a couple of years ago, and even more strongly a year ago, that this day of reckoning would come. That someday he would be held accountable. We thought it was going to be for the Mueller investigation. We didn't know that the Ukraine situation was even going to emerge. We couldn't see that in our crystal ball. But that once the S hit the fan, I don't know what you can say, what words we can say on your platform, that he was going to decompensate and that he would become even more dangerous. Because first of all, the situation is his cognitive decline has continued. He now, however, has created a situation where there are no safety on the gun. There are no adults in the White House anymore. And this is what these dictators do. They purge the government and the bureaucracy of anyone who isn't slavishly loyal and sycophantic. So not only in his administration, but we found out today that he's fired a third of the diplomats. He's getting rid of anyone, not only the ones in Ukraine that he tried to get rid of, but anyone who could possibly stand in his way or say no or offer a conflicting opinion or provide expertise or information which contradicts his crazy conspiracy theories. All those people have been removed. And now he's in a state of maximum agitation. As we said in our last op-ed in USA Today, we think he may be even having a bit of a hypomanic episode. And that would kind of fit with the chest pain thing, meaning his whole energy level is now at a frantic pace. And if you look at his activities, they're becoming even more erratic. Look, I think most recently, very dramatically, was his withdrawal from Syria, where he literally had a conversation with the head of Turkey, president of Turkey, and then picked up the phone and told the troops to start withdrawing without discussing it. He didn't even discuss it with one member of his own administration.
Now, something like that, could that just be that he's ignorant and doesn't care what anyone else thinks, but not necessarily indicative of a cognitive concern?
Well, I think here that it's really the psychiatric point I was making here is that there's something impulsive and accelerated. So there's something manic about his decision making now. And actually, if you read the descriptions of his tweets, this is when the impeachment thing just started heating up, people were commenting on the tweets being manic. That was one of the words people kept using to describe them, because he was like tweeting like 30, 40, 50 times a day, you know, with this sort of screed that was completely off the hook. But in other words, that's not abnormal for him. But now he was doing it more and more quickly and more rapidly and more frequently, so that there's kind of a way in which the water is boiling now. The boiling point has it's boiling over, is what I'm really trying to say.
So in terms of some of the policy stuff can be sort of a proxy to his cognitive state. But last time we talked, we had all of these examples of the slurring, which we don't know if is maybe related to sort of some kind of drug abuse or cognitive decline. There was him repeating that he wants to find the oranges of an investigation. He repeated it twice, and you could see that he seemed to have some recognition that he was saying something that didn't make sense, but sort of unable to correct it. We had him getting off of Air Force One and wandering away from his car and having to be brought back. Something similar happened in Argentina when he wandered off stage after being introduced and shaking hands with the president. Are we seeing more of those things, or are we mostly looking at sort of through policy as a proxy?
No, actually, in honor of your show, I made a little sheet of the latest signs of cognitive decline. First of all, I just want to point out this excellent book from Anonymous summarizes it very well when they say he stumbles, he slurs, he gets confused, he can't synthesize information, he can't remember anything, and this doesn't just happen sometimes. So that's a summary. But most recently in the past few months, for example, when he was speaking to the troops, this is just a month ago, he said, "Our armed forces have always lived by the words of Douglas MacArthur." You notice in both those cases, he didn't finish the word. This is really a phonetic paraphasia that we really only see in people who are either drunk or developing Alzheimer's. But no, there's an organic brain problem, either temporary or permanent. But in his case, it's not temporary, so it can't be that he's drunk.
Okay, so let's look at that. That's actually very interesting. So this is a symptom which you as a mental health professional can say, there is a limited number of explanations for that particular symptom.
Correct.
And for example, the alleged dyslexia that some suspect Trump has, that would not be a possible explanation for that linguistic phenomena.
No, because people who I have dyslexia, as a matter of fact, I don't because look at some of these other examples. Instead of stock market, he said sock rocket. He couldn't pronounce obsolete or applicable. He said at NATO just this week that U.S. has the most powerful military in the world. He wanted to say powerful, but he said powerful. He couldn't finish the word. So this kind of, so to get to your point, we have a term in psychiatry that something can be pathognomonic, meaning if someone has that symptom, we know what the illness is, because there's, as you say, a limited number of possibilities. There's a very limited number of possibilities for this kind of breakdown in the ability to speak English. And it's not just pronunciation, it's also comprehension. So he's showing a loss in his ability to comprehend, in the complexity of his sentences, in his ability to stay on topic without going off on an irrelevancy, on his repetitions. Repetition is actually a sign of cognitive decline. He keeps saying the same thing over and over again. His use of superlatives, everything's the greatest or the worst, or there's no nuance in the words. And also his memory. Remember, he said his father was born in Germany when it was his grandfather that was born in Germany. Well, he recently said to the president of Italy, who he called President Mozzarella instead of Mozzarella, and said, "We've been allies since ancient Rome." I mean, he's getting time. America didn't exist. America was filled with Native Americans during the time of ancient Rome. So, in other words, he's getting all these times confused and places confused and names confused. It's more of a generic breakdown. Even his balance is poor. There's a generic with Alzheimer's. There's a breakdown in all of the cognitive functions, all of them. And that's
so that actually, you mentioned so let me bring up one other element related to the Walter Reed visit. let's imagine that we just don't know what the Walter Reed visit was about. One of the things that was observed afterwards was that he was getting off of Air Force One from the low stairs rather than the high stairs, and that at least one time when getting off of the high stairs, he had a senator walking right next to him, really kind of keeping him up against the railing.
Yeah,
Again,
propping him up.
propping him up was the sort of colloquial way that it was described. Does
Yeah.
that tell us anything in terms of how it might
Yes.
connect with what you're discussing?
Yes. Loss of balance goes with it. Because again, all of the mental functions are deteriorating, including the ability to maneuver physically in space. So his stumbling verbally and his stumbling physically are part of the same generic overall deterioration.
What would be the test that would determine whether something is going on here?
Well, we've been calling for 2 years now for him to get a neuropsychological battery of tests. It's a battery of tests that evaluate people at their cognitive functioning at a whole bunch of levels with a whole bunch of different tasks. What we actually asked Ronnie Jackson, his doctor. We actually sent a letter with 70 doctors asking him to give him the MoCA, which he did. And he passed the MoCA, which he said proved he was a stable genius and more intelligent than all past presidents, which is a little bit like saying, I passed a first grade exam and that makes me Mensa. Most kindergartners, just to give you a sense, can pass the MoCA. It's things like, can you identify a camel? Can you repeat 3 words backwards?
Yeah, but are they the smart kindergartners?
No, the ones who couldn't do it, we would hold them back. I mean,
right.
So it's true. He hadn't reached that level of dementia. But, one of the people in the anonymous book said that Trump is sort of like going to the White House is kind of like going to a nursing home and your uncle is running around the courtyard without pants. I mean, in other words, he's not at the point where he's so demented that he can't remember his own name or won't recognize his own children. But he thinks his father was born in Germany and he can't pronounce words and he doesn't remember things. And he can't understand things. So he's given this is a guy who used to go to Ivy League schools, even if his dad got him, and he still went there. And now he's really fallen so far from his own baseline. And that's one of the things that we use to determine cognitive decline is different people have different abilities, right? But we have to compare someone to their own baseline. You look at speeches he made in the 80s, he sounds extremely articulate and bright, even though he sounds like a jerk. And you compare him to now and you see that he's lost 30 or 40 IQ points.
What did you make? I don't know if you saw this, but during the first impeachment hearings, he went out and did one of the helicopter press conference where he had notes about what he reportedly told Gordon Sondland during a phone call. And he seemed very erratic, yelling, "I want nothing, no quit," that very strange, kind of like strained and repeating over and over again. Was there anything about that episode that either coincides with or goes against the impression that you're getting from his other behavior?
Well, first of all, the fact that he has to carry notes, right, written in Sharpie to say no quid pro quo. It's almost like the MoCA. That's 4 words forward. He can remember 4 words without having to refer to notes. So I think that's already telling you something about his cognitive level of functioning. And the other thing I just want to say is he just says bizarre stuff. Like he was saying yesterday that, the next president, they'll impeach him if he goes to the refrigerator and gets oranges.
Right, but isn't some of this just Trump's personality?
That's where it's really instructive to look at the videos of him in the 80s, because really he was literally the same jerk then that he is now, because a personality disorder is a lifetime disorder. You have it from the time you're young and you have it till you die. And in his case, it's actually gotten worse. We've talked about this in terms of malignant narcissism. The malignant narcissists gain power, their grandiosity and their paranoia, as well as their sadism and their anti-social, becomes inflamed because now they feel empowered. Like he says, now I'm president, I can do whatever I want, And so his personality disorder actually has gotten worse. But his cognitive functioning is much worse than it was when he was still a jerk as a young man. So we really have now a series of forces that are making him maximally dangerous right now. We were all kind of getting a laugh out of how the world leaders were laughing at him at NATO and them laughing at him. But remember, it was Barack Obama laughing at him that goaded him to run for president. This is a guy who gets even. Okay, so now he wants to get even with these guys at NATO, our allies. And he's already been antagonistic, but I'm saying he feels like he's on his back. He feels weakened. He feels attacked. And so his response is to do something more aggressive, more destructive, to feel more powerful. And so all of the things that are making him a wounded animal are making him more dangerous now than he ever was.
We've been speaking with Dr. John Gartner, founder of Duty to Warn, co-editor of Rocket Man, Nuclear Madness and the Mind of Donald Trump. He taught in the Department of Psychiatry at Johns Hopkins Medical Center for nearly 30 years. Always so great to have you on.
Yeah, thank you. Always good to be on. I appreciate it.